We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the centre of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 29th of August 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up, Argentina's president is pelted with rocks on the campaign trail. Is this the beginning of the end for Javier Milei? Also ahead in the next 60 minutes.
It shows that the Kremlin will stop at nothing to terrorize Ukraine, blindly killing civilians, men, women and children, and even targeting the European Union.
Russia carries out another devastating attack on Ukraine with 21 people killed in strikes on Kyiv. We'll have the latest, plus more on Europe's continuing efforts to put pressure on Moscow. And Andrew Muller will bring us up to date on the events of the last 7 days that we may have missed.
Donald Trump is not merely the most sagacious, perspicacious, vivacious, tenacious, audacious and bodacious ever occupant of the role he presently holds, but literally the single greatest human being who has ever lived.
Plus the papers and why Jaws still terrifies and thrills at 50. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in today's news. Britain, France and Germany have started the process of reimposing sanctions on Iran. The Venezuelan ambassador to the UN has written to the UN Secretary-General to complain about the build-up of US ships off its coast. And the United States has introduced new import duties on low-value postal packages arriving from all around the world. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, Argentina's president, Javier Milei, was elected on a radical anti-politics ticket, brandishing a chainsaw to illustrate his determination to carve up the old way of doing things, which he believed was holding his country back so badly. Well, as the country approaches its midterm elections, Mr. Milei has learned to his cost that he has become a politician like any other. He was pelted with rocks and bottles by angry voters at a rally. So what has gone wrong for Javier Milei? Well, I'm joined now by Andrew Thompson, Latin American specialist and Latin news contributor. Very good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning.
These were very ugly scenes. Why were people throwing things at him?
I think the key reason was that he was campaigning in Lomas de Zamora, a neighborhood of Buenos Aires which is traditionally dominated by the Peronist opposition. It's also the case that next Sunday there'll be elections in Buenos Aires province. So there's a general increase in political tensions as Milei's coalition battles with the centre-left coalition of the Peronists.
And just explain to us, this is sort of very much an internal battle, but this was something that Milei had always promised would never happen, that he would be the man who would carve up Argentinian politics.
Correct. I think the key thing we have to visualize is all that campaigning he did with the chainsaw, promising to cut government spending, to have a radical right-wing libertarian approach, and really to tackle what Milei calls the political caste CASTE. It's like the embedded, old-fashioned, corrupt leadership of Argentina, which Milei was going to change. However, in the last few days, the last week really, he's facing a major corruption scandal involving kickbacks paid to members of his own party, including his sister, Karina Milei, who is a key figure in the government. So very, very publicly, events seem to be saying that Milei isn't really that different after all, and is pretty much another corrupt politician, which is a major changing point and is already beginning to show up in the opinion polls.
This is indeed, because this, as we have mentioned, was not what Milei set out to do. In terms of what Javier Milei has done for Argentina in terms of the rearrangement of its finances and financial recovery and indeed changing society at all, what effect has he had so far?
He has had a significant effect. So even his opponents have to admit that he's been relatively successful in bringing down the inflation rate. He's done what a lot of previous governments completely failed to do, which was try to bring some fiscal discipline, reducing the government budget deficit, in fact, eliminating it. And the inflation rate has gone from above 200% to a current annual rate of 40%, which is still high. But for a large proportion of Argentines, it's an important change and an improvement. Milei is, shall we say, he's suffering a significant setback, but he still appeals to a significant proportion of the Argentine population.
So what does that suggest for his longer-term prospects? We're coming up to the midterms next week, September the 7th. The midterms are usually the moment when an electorate is able to metaphorically throw bricks at its leader. What are we expecting here?
I think it's difficult to be absolutely clear in terms of forecasts, but at the moment, Milei's party, La Libertad Avanza, is in a minority in Congress, and he wants the midterms to give him a majority so he can set about pro-market structural reforms, various things that Congress has stopped him doing so far. On the balance of the last few days, there is, I think, a suggestion that he won't get the swing in votes he needs to win a majority in Congress. So it will be a hard slog for him, and he will, like a lot of other politicians, find that the second half of his presidential term is full of difficulties, not the, if you like, the open way to reform that he hopes for.
What lessons has he missed along the way? You've already mentioned the corruption scandal involving his family. But in terms of not satisfying or connecting with voters and citizens, where has it gone wrong for him?
I think the key thing that's gone wrong is the fact that he's raised expectations. He's dismissed everyone before him as rubbish, basically. He's been aggressive towards the opposition. And this has raised expectations which he can't fulfill. He set the bar very high. So people will remember the chainsaw, and they will think about it and think that he's fallen short of what he's promised. The Argentine political establishment is not sort of, shall we say, the swamp hasn't been drained, and that realization sets him back quite a bit.
That phrase that you've just used leads us to the connection and the international reputation that Javier Milei has with Donald Trump. How much has that changed the way that Argentina is viewed by the rest of the world?
It's hard to say, really. Argentina is kind of well known for its very powerful, very long-lasting, very, shall we say, disorganized, but still powerful Peronist opposition. And for many international observers, Milei is a sign that the long dominance of Peronism, a populist political party, is coming to an end. That said, the event of the last few days and weeks suggests that Peronism still has a degree of fight in it, even though it's divided internally and involved in all sorts of disputes. Peronism may remain a force in Argentina and be seen as such internationally.
And finally, while we've got you on the line, Andrew, the reports and we'll mention this later on in the headlines, is that the Venezuelan ambassador to the UN has written to the UN Secretary General because there's been this build-up of US ships off the coast of Venezuela. Washington saying it's doing it to counter the threat posed by drug cartels. Venezuela is not taking to this very kindly. What is going on?
Basically, it's a fight between Donald Trump and Nicolás Maduro, the Venezuelan president, and it's quite a serious fight. Donald Trump has said that he wants to take direct military action against cartels, who he has redesignated as foreign terrorist organizations. So, this has caused tension across the region. There is worry in Mexico, for example, that the U.S. might try some sort of unilateral strike against the Sinaloa cartel or some of the other powerful cartels. But there is also a very important Venezuelan dimension to this, that the U.S. is claiming that Maduro is himself the leader of a cartel, the cartel of the suns, Cartel de los Soles, which the Venezuelan government says doesn't exist, and it's all a way of preparing an attack on their country. From looking at it from the outside, there is a possibility that the U.S. is seriously considering some kind of strike on a Venezuelan target. Venezuela has mobilized or is mobilizing the national militia and taking various other defensive measures. So it is, if you like, an ongoing confrontation in the Southern Caribbean area, which may lead to serious military action in the next few weeks.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Andrew Thompson, Latin American specialist and Latin news contributor. You're listening to The Globalist. It's 9:11 a.m. in Kyiv, a city which became Moscow's target once again yesterday, with 21 people killed in Russian strikes. Not only was it the worst attack on the Ukrainian capital since July, it also took on an international element, with the EU headquarters and a Turkish drone factory also targeted. Well, I'm joined in the studio by Monocle's researcher, writer and Ukraine expert Julia Jen. Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
This is, dare I say it, not a great surprise, but a very sad state of affairs, because I remember the last conversation that you and I had, not in front of a microphone, was how's Kyiv been this summer? And you said, it's been great. They've dialed down the attacks. And we then said, we're just waiting for them to start again. And this is what happened.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the summer holidays are over now. Back to school, back to normal life.
Of being bombed.
Exactly. Obviously, laughing with dark humour there, nothing to laugh about. But yeah, absolutely. Over the summer, there was a real feeling that perhaps because of the peace talks, this progress that supposedly is being made, Putin was kind of shying away from really targeting Kyiv. That said, there's still a huge drone attacks. A week ago, my mother and siblings were in Kyiv and they stayed up all night because there were ballistic missiles flying over the capital en route to western cities and, drone attacks. But there was nothing of this scale, nothing of the scale of what we saw yesterday morning when the sun began to rise over Kyiv and just destroyed buildings and smoke everywhere. And I think it really does feel like, Trump's reaction also yesterday was really interesting. He said, I'm angry at both sides. He said that, Ukraine, almost, not quite in these words, but almost sort of hinting that Ukraine asked for this because they have been targeting Russian oil and gas facilities. So he noted that Ukraine has targeted and managed to really damage 20% of Russia's oil refinery kind of capabilities over the 1 month of August, which is astounding loss for the Russian side. And he sort of played this as, the Russians have a right to a reaction. So Trump's own reaction to this is very much kind of chilling, in the sense that, before in the attacks, he would really go on the offensive, really say he's kind of pissed off or whatever at at Putin. But here he's being quite cold and pragmatic.
The one thing that did mark a change then, not just the targeting of civilians and apartments were destroyed, weren't they? Were blown up yesterday in Kyiv, was the fact that the international community found itself on the receiving end of Moscow's weapons as well. We had the EU building being targeted. I think the British Council was targeted as well. And we had a Turkish Turkish drone manufacturer as well being targeted. That changes things.
Definitely. Or, as Ukrainians might say, well, it's just a sign of Russia's sort of feeling of impunity before the international community. So, for example, in the last week, they've announced their intention to withdraw from the torture sort of convention that lots of, Western and international communities are signed up to. So that's banning torture. I mean, we know that there's torture in Russian prisons. We know that that's something they regularly use on, Ukrainian prisoners of war and other people who are unlucky to come into their grasp. But to sort of formally withdraw from that just shows that they're not interested in cooperation with the international community.
Indeed, what message is Putin trying to send through this? Is it one of disregard, or is it one of a deliberate antagonism?
I think it's just that the war continues. Leaders can fly anywhere they want and they can meet anywhere they want. But it's that his goal continues to be the subjugation of Ukraine, the destruction of normal life in Ukraine. So actually, interesting, one of the places that was attacked yesterday night was a depot of intercity trains in western Ukraine. So these are intercity trains that take passengers from the Polish border down in Przemysl, so near Krakow, and they'll take them up. Really nice journey, very quick, very, very stylish, very like European style. When I went on that train, I was so kind of in love with how slick and smooth everything was. And they take you up through Lviv to Kyiv. That was attacked. They destroyed some of these trains. Luckily, no staff were hurt in that attack. But, it just shows that they want to cut off Ukraine from the rest of the world. They want to put that kind of dark curtain down. And strikes like that really bring that message home, because the stress that you go through, the feeling of fear, the feeling of just you're losing your dignity as a human being. And it feels like that is sort of just Putin's message, really. I can keep doing what I want. Impunity.
And we now have EU defence ministers meeting today. They have two messages to send, don't they? They have a message to Putin in Moscow and things that need to be done in order to maintain their unity and the strength which they demonstrated in Washington last week. But they also need to send a message to Washington as well. I mean, what do they need to say to Donald Trump and indeed to Vladimir Putin to ensure that the European Union itself can enact change in this?
Yeah, absolutely. Analysts are saying that there's a really interesting sort of clause in all of the kind of discussions that are happening right now, which is that peacekeeping forces will only be sent in the event of a ceasefire. Now, we can see Trump and Putin are supposedly trying to set up this ceasefire, but at huge territorial loss to Ukraine. Another thing, and so what kind of messages are the Europeans sending there? If they're only willing to send peacekeeping forces or to show their own strength at the kind of behest or at the kind of with the permission of Moscow and of Washington, I mean, I don't see that. Lots of analysts are saying that that's not really a position of strength. Secondly, what analysts are really saying is what they really should be doing there in their meeting today, which really will set the tone for the next few months, is to very clearly understand Trump isn't their friend in all of this. He's never been their friend in all of this. We have to look at his actions and not his words, and any security guarantees that the US supposedly will provide, which we know is air support, that's what they've said, and intelligence support. These are, again, at the whim of Trump. We've seen how quickly he's changed his tone, how quickly he's changed, things that are being given to Ukraine or not being given to Ukraine. They have to very seriously basically strategize, analysts are saying, how does Ukraine win this war? Be really clear with their words in terms of that. And really, that's the Ukrainian security guarantee, is the Ukrainian ability to actually defend itself and actually, protect its own population from terror.
Finally, while I've got you here, Julia, and you can put your magazine hat on as well, because you work very, very closely pulling together and and making sure that each edition of Monocle magazine has some good stuff in it. There's an article in this September's edition, which is an incredible one about the way that the world recruits its military. I think it could be quite easily said that a lot of countries have a very lackluster approach when it comes to engaging young people, getting people fired up. And, normally it's a sort of a small dusty recruitment office with dead flies in the window and some poor soul who looks as if they really don't want to be there down some back street. That is what the perception of military recruitment is. But more broadly, given what is happening in the world at the moment, given, dare I say it, that many of your compatriots are actually on the front line at the moment, what is the world doing to either encourage or indeed make military service as relevant to society as it is to geopolitics?
Yeah, absolutely. So it might sound silly, but they're making it seem like an adventure. So they're sort of saying to Gen Z, which is really the target audience, all these kids who sit on their phones and who sort of exist in this kind of humdrum world of work, internships, applying for things, never getting a reply for this or that, whatever, constantly checking emails. They're saying, get out there into the outdoor world and have an adventure. So lots and lots of countries have gone away. We can look at the US, we can look at Singapore, we can look at France. Lots of countries have gone away from this nationalistic sort of, follow the flag or kind of fight for your country sort of messaging, that sort of slogan that we saw in the 20th century. And they've gone for, be all you can be. So sort of live up to your potential, get out into the outdoor world, do some exercise, really train yourself, test your limits. What are you capable of? They're basically asking them that. So they're sort of setting a challenge. And actually we can see that young populations really respond to that. They really respond to this idea that they actually have something to offer in terms of, skills that are not tested out in the office environment or in a school environment. And they're really actually stepping up to that challenge. We can see some really positive figures when the messaging changes to that.
Julia Jen, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. Julia is Monocle's researcher, writer and Ukraine expert. Still to come on today's programme. What we're going to be talking about later on today's programme. Jaws is 50 and we'll celebrate why half a century on we'll still never go in the water again. Stay with us on The Globalist.
Each of us has a craft, a calling that inspires us. Whether it's how a coffee is brewed, a chair is built, or how money is looked after. There's a love for the work, a care that compels you forward. For us at UBS, it's about designing a unique outcome for you. Because whatever your craft may be, ours is built around helping you succeed. UBS. Banking is our craft.
It's 9:22 in Kyiv, 7:22 here in London. Let's continue now with today's newspapers. Joining me on the line from Dubai is Inzamam Rashid, who's Monocle's Gulf correspondent. Very good morning to you, Inzamam. What's Dubai up to today?
Morning, Emma. Well, plenty happening in Dubai and plenty happening across the Gulf and the wider Middle East as well. Would start off with Europe's sanctions on Iran, which they announced yesterday. And this is, of course, France, Germany and the UK, the E3, triggering the so-called snapback clause at the UN, reinstating a series of nuclear-related sanctions on Iran. The move reactivates arms embargoes, asset freezes and restrictions on missile development after the three countries accused Tehran of persistent breaches of its commitments. Europe have said that it still wants dialogue with Iran, but Iran has rejected the legal grounds and has threatened to further escalate. I think, Emma, this is probably can be seen as a bit more than a diplomatic spat. It's probably a bit of a calculated gamble by Europe. On one hand, the sanctions are designed to kind of shore up leverage ahead of these looming deadlines in October the 18th. And on the other, they risk kind of pushing Iran further away from the negotiating table, which many countries have worked hard to bring them to, like countries here in the Gulf, especially the UAE. And I think the symbolism of all of this matters as well, because Europe is reasserting itself on the global stage at a time when Washington is distracted. Trump has got a lot of national issues, even though the E3 did call up Secretary Marco Rubio and informed him. And of course, regional tensions here are high. I think the question now is whether this kind of hard-nosed stance from the E3 opens a path back to talks, or whether it simply hardens Iran's resolve to chart its own course.
Inzamam, how are the papers reacting to this where you are, given the fact that this is now, and you know, the involvement of the likes of Britain, France and Germany in very much in the Middle East is not always completely welcome?
No, it's interesting. The National reporting on this today, it's their top story. And they have basically kind of questioned whether, this is a bit too much of a bold move, given there has been so much work to bring Iran to the negotiation table. Iran project director at Crisis Group, Ali Vaez, told The National there is a sense of inertia within the Iranian political leadership, but that is also partly the result of Europeans not giving Iran a real exit ramp. So I think perhaps there is a feeling, particularly in Iran, and maybe the wider Gulf as well, that there maybe needs to be a bit more leeway for Iran. Of course, this just came in yesterday, and I think that the reaction will be pretty interesting throughout the next few days.
Let's talk about Dubai, where you are at the moment. 4 million people are now Dubai inhabitants, residents, and the population is going to grow exponentially in the next 5 years. And just tell us how that's been reported where you are.
Yeah, this is also interesting. A lot of people talking about this across the UAE in particular today. Dubai Eye 103.8, the English talk radio station out here, heavily reporting about this morning. And they were talking about whether there is actually going to be enough infrastructure, enough stuff for all the people that are living here in Dubai. Right now, as a resident myself, it maybe doesn't feel like that, given there is a lot of traffic on the roads, a lot of people struggling to find affordable accommodation as well. But they are ramping up roadworks, they are building more and more, and I think that will be interesting, given the authorities are targeting a 5 million population by 2030, part of Dubai's long-term growth vision. What is the magnet? Well, of course, a combination of tax breaks, world-class infrastructure here, and increasingly diversified economy. But I think when you look at it, Dubai has kind of always been a city of ambition, but it's this kind of growth that underlines its role as the Middle East's most dynamic hub. 6% annual population growth is extraordinary, you can imagine, by global standards, but it does come with that pressure, Emma. Housing, public services, mobility has to keep at pace with the influx of all these new residents. I don't think it necessarily has been doing that up until now, but it's got huge ambitions to do that over the next 5 to 10 years.
And is there a sense that this actually will be achievable and indeed is desired by the residents of Dubai?
I think achievable, absolutely. I do believe that the UAE as a whole, and particularly Dubai, has that kind of vision and has the capability to do that. It's already proven in the past to kind of come up with things which have made this a city a much more livable city, and for the huge influx of people that are coming in. The other question is what you just pointed out, is whether people actually want it. I kind of feel now we're at a stage where people are saying there's no more room. There is no more room. When someone posts another post on LinkedIn saying, I've left my job in the UK, I'm moving to Dubai, everyone's like, there's no more room and there's no more space for you. So perhaps people are getting a bit frustrated by the huge influx of residents.
Inzamam Rashid, Monocle's Gulf correspondent in Dubai. Thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. And now here's a quick summary of some of the other stories we're keeping an eye on today here at Monocle Radio. Britain, France and Germany have started the process of reimposing sanctions on Iran. They say Tehran is in clear and deliberate breach of the 2015 deal to limit its nuclear activities. Critics fear they've given up on negotiation. Iran says the move is illegal and unjustified. The Venezuelan ambassador to the United Nations has written to the UN Secretary-General to complain about the build-up of US ships off its coast. Washington says they've been deployed to counter the threat posed by drug cartels. And the United States has introduced new import duties on low-value postal packages. The charges had already been forced on some goods from China and Hong Kong, but now they apply to the rest of the world. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. And we stay with the theme of tariffs because India is beginning to feel the full force of Donald Trump's use of trade to end conflicts. As the country continues to buy oil from Moscow, tariffs of 50% have been slapped on Indian exports to the US. And a White House official has described Russia's ongoing war with Ukraine as the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's war. Well, in the middle of all this, Prime Minister Modi is on his way to Japan, a nation bruised but not beaten yet by its trade deal with Washington. So what can the two countries learn from each other? Well, I'm joined now by Maya Sharma, who's an Indian journalist, broadcaster and teacher based in Bangalore, and by Robert Ward, Japan chair of the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Good afternoon to you both.
Hello there.
Good afternoon.
Maya, let's begin with you. I mean, how have the effects of these punishing tariffs been felt in the first 2 days that they've been in operation?
There has been a considerable amount of panic because this may seem a little remote from the everyday person, but it is having a very direct and strong impact on the ground. The tariffs are applied in areas which are very labor intensive, like textile exports, gems and jewelry, things like that, garments where people are losing their jobs immediately because orders are drying up from the United States, which was a huge consumer, which means that the exporters are cutting down on what they're getting. The production is down and people are losing their jobs. It's having an immediate effect, maybe not so much on big business, but it's having a big impact on people who earn their living in these industries like textiles, gems and jewelry. It's also causing a lot of political impact as well, with the opposition targeting the Narendra Modi government, saying, why are you letting this bullying happen? When are you going to stand up for you? When are you going to kind of talk back to Donald Trump and the United States government? It's caused a lot of unrest and a lot of discontent and unhappiness, with India really feeling it's been treated very unfairly in all this. And especially being described as Modi's war. I think even detractors of the Prime Minister would not really go along with that statement.
Staying with you, Maya, before we move to you, Robert, that idea that this is Modi's war is a very, very personal attack on a policy which, to many, has actually put India on the wrong side of history. Namely, it is buying cheap oil from Russia and does not seem to have a problem with doing so.
You know what India's stand is on this, which has been often repeated, is that they were pretty much asked to do so. The United States, European countries did not want the sale of Russian oil to stop because that would mean the oil prices worldwide would go up. They wanted India, which is one of the biggest consumers of oil, of course, to find its sourcing of oil elsewhere than the pool from which the United States and Europe was sourcing its oil. So it was encouraged, India says, to go with Russian oil. Also because there was a price cap on Russian oil. It didn't mean that Russia was profiting hugely because of the sale of that oil. Yes, India's share of Russian oil imports has grown from about 2% before the conflict to about 30% now. 30% of their oil requirements are imported from Russia. But they are saying, firstly, that they were asked to do so by the West in order to keep oil prices low and to keep the profits of Russia down. But they're also saying that why target us? China's import is even higher, that Europe's trade with Russia and even America's trade with Russia still exists. So why is India being targeted like this? The base tariff is 25%, and this extra 25% has really ruffled feathers here in India.
Robert, let's move to you and the position that Japan is occupying in all this. The fact is that Japan has managed to somehow strike a deal with the United States, which has brought quite a lot of relief to the Japanese economy. But the fact remains is that Narendra Modi's on his way there at the moment, and this is the first time that Narendra Modi has been to Japan since 2018 for a bilateral summit at least. Is there a sense that there's quite a lot of catching up to do between these countries?
Well, yes. I mean, lots to unpack here. I mean, Japan, I think, is actually probably more used than most countries to dealing with the US and dealing with US unpredictability. So, as you say, they managed to get a deal that sort of is not particularly favourable for Japan, but better than it might otherwise have been. Within this sort of US uncertainty, Japan-India relations are even more important than they have been for Japan and probably for India as well, actually. Japan and India have had a long history of good relations, but particularly since the 2000s, when I think Japan identified India more specifically as a sort of strategic ally. But they really deepened under Prime Minister Abe Shinzo from 2012. For Japan, India has there's a lot of complementarity in the relationship. These are two of Asia's most important democracies. There are economic links. There are strategic links. There are security links and all that as well. So this is a really important relationship for Japan, and particularly given that Japan and others are worried about the US's commitment to the region. So obviously Japan needs to try to secure its network of allies and partners in the region.
Indeed, Robert. I mean, just developing on that point a little, with the fact that America is not the safe harbour that it has been until quite recently. So where are the opportunities for Japan and India to move together, to pivot to a new regional alliance, which hitherto wasn't around?
Well, there are a number of channels for this, some of which are already operating. One, of course, is the Quad. This is the relationship between India, Australia, Japan, and the US. So Japan's been working well with Australia. There was Australia chose the Japanese Mogami frigate as part of its upgrade for its naval assets, which was very important. The India relationship, as we've seen, will deepen following Prime Minister Modi's visit to Japan. But there are I think, a number of important sub-issues here. One is, I think, around this what I mentioned earlier is the complementarity of the relationship. Economic security is very important, particularly, again, given the buffeting that the rest of the world is receiving from the US, and, of course, concerns about China. And here, Japan and India, I think, have a very good complementarity, particularly around, for example, semiconductors, AI, all this high tech areas. One area of this complementarity, I think, is India has the human capital. Japan's population is declining now at the rate of about 500,000 per year. So obviously workers, skills are a problem for Japan. India has fantastic human capital, but Japan has the funds and the technological expertise. So in this important high-tech area, for example, I think you're going to see quite a lot of progress. I saw a report in the Japanese media the other day that there could be some $70 billion of Japanese investment over the next 10 years being announced after this meeting, which obviously would be very welcome for India.
Finally, coming back to you, Maya, the personal relationships between the Japanese Prime Minister and the Indian Prime Minister, where is there warmth and connection there?
Well, of course, this will be the first time that Modi is visiting Japan for a bilateral meeting since Shigeru Ishiba actually took over. Prime Minister Modi did have a very close connection with the earlier leaders. He will be meeting Mr. Ishiba and kind of consolidating that. But as Robert was saying, it is a very important relationship right now, something that India would want to build on. the relationship with the United States was considered fairly close. And it was even considered that the personal relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump was very close. But, well, that does seem to be facing a bit of friction there, to put it mildly. So India is very invested, very interested in making even closer friendships with other countries with whom it has been getting along. Yes, an almost $70 billion investment expected over the next 10 years, whether it's Toyota Kirloskar expanding its plant here in Karnataka, whether it's bullet train technology coming between Ahmedabad and Mumbai, whether it's a Suzuki also starting up an EV plant in Gujarat, Prime Minister Modi's home state. India is very keen on making sure that its relationship with Japan and Japan's leader is as warm as possible, particularly considering the rather frosty ties with the United States at this moment.
Maya Sharma, journalist based in Bangalore, and Robert Ward, Japan chair of the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you both. You're listening to The Globalist. Now, it's time to find out what we learned this week. Here's Andrew Muller.
We learned this week that US President Donald Trump is not merely the most sagacious, perspicacious, vivacious, tenacious, audacious and bodacious ever occupant of the role he presently holds, but literally the single greatest human being who has ever lived.
I can't wait to see where this goes.
Tell me more.
Let's see where this goes.
We learned this on no less authority than his own cabinet, i.e. the people who depend more than anybody else on the president's whim for their rank, salary and, who knows, immunity from prosecution. And we learned it from the broadcast of a cabinet meeting which was, to be clear, in absolutely no respect, a preposterous choreographed grovel that would have caused Kim Jong-un to say, "All right, lads, don't trowel it on too thick." Though among other Trump associates who have never received this instruction is his makeup artist. Am I right? Hey, we're just getting started. Thanks for coming out. We learned that Steve Witkoff, the New York City real estate agent who is for some reason US Special Envoy to the Middle East, can scarcely sleep for concern about the present deliberations of a coterie of Norwegians.
And there's only one thing I wish for, that Nobel Committee finally gets its act together and realizes that you are the single finest candidate since the this Nobel Award was ever talked about to receive that reward.
Well, quite. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Albert Schweitzer, Dag Hammarskjöld, Lech Walesa, Malala Yousafzai, Desmond Tutu, Narges Mohammed, the International Committee of the Red Cross, United Nations Peacekeeping Forces. Who do any of you deadbeats think you are? But we learned at least one of Trump's officials had gone further than merely issuing damp-eyed pleas to the Norwegian Nobel Committee, who, if they're listening, could greatly enhance the general gaiety by giving it to Barack Obama again for a laugh. We learned that Lori Chavez de Reyma, US Secretary of Labor, had taken the completely normal step of hanging an enormous picture of her boss off the front of her place of work.
Mr. President, I invite you to see your big, beautiful face on a banner in front of the Department of Labor, because you are really the transformational president of the American worker.
We have commissioned a new sound effect for moments such as these. It is the word wow, rendered as an expression of weary dismay. Hit it, Steph.
Wow.
On form, not the last time it will come in handy. Because we learned that there was literally another 3 hours of this excruciating nonsense, as someone once said after being taken to see Pink Floyd. Here are further highlights.
Thank you for your leadership, for your boldness, for your clarity, for common sense.
This is just such a great opportunity, really, to recognize your leadership.
Steph, are you still here?
Wow.
But we learned that an imaginary Nobel Prize and a hero of socialist labour were not the only accolades bestowed upon the president this week. We learned that he is also a World Cup winner. The theme tune of the 2026 World Cup, apparently. Anyway, we learned that Gianni Infantino, president of FIFA, had seen fit to lug the World Cup trophy into the White House, perhaps hoping to contribute to some attempt to break the record for largest collection of tacky gold objects ever gathered in one office, if Trump's supplicants are looking for further prizes to award him, and may have got momentarily carried away with excitement at not being quite the worst person in any given room.
Only the FIFA presidents of countries, and then those who win can touch it, because it's for winners only. And since you are a winner, of course, you can as well touch it.
The president appeared delighted. Possibly the phrase, "since you are a winner, of course you can touch it," reminded him of happier times as proprietor of Miss USA. What? But, sticking with the subject of dubious talent quests, we learned that the US was sending to Russia this.
I just need a cup of tea and one more song.
That being B. Howard, more like B. List, who will represent the United States next month at the revival of Intervision, which, as the name hints, was a Soviet knockoff of Eurovision. So it's the song contest equivalent of those tracksuits by Timmy Hilfiger and Louis Vuitton, which may be found hanging from the less reputable market stalls of Chelyabinsk and Omsk.
So let's stop playing games.
Mallet. And moving from an event at which the participants should have tomatoes thrown at them to an event where the participants do, we learned that this week saw the 80th anniversary of La Tomatina, in which revelers gather annually in the Spanish settlement of Buñol and pelt each other with said red fruit. Happy La Tomatina to all those who celebrated. Thanks as always for joining us for What We Learned, Monocle Radio's weekly news. Ketchup.
Wow.
For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
Thank you, Andrew. And if you enjoyed that, then another fresh instalment of What We Learned will air at 7 a.m. every Friday, right here on The Globalist.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS. Banking is our craft.
It's 7:45 here in London. It's 9:45 if you're listening in Athens. And I'm joined in the studio by Emmanuel Papavasiliou, who's a Greek journalist and Monocle contributor, to bring us the news from the Med. Welcome back to the studio, Manos.
Thank you. Lovely to be here, Emma.
There's a slight irony here that you're here to talk about tourism, wine, the stuff that's going on in Greece and the Med. You're sitting here like a drowned rat on a rainy Friday morning.
I cycled here, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's still wearing the anorak, and it is and he came in and said, "I'm sorry, I can't give you a hug. It's absolutely pelting down outside." So, welcome to the comparative warmth and dry of London. How's life in London? Because you were in Greece, now you're back here, so you're sort of a bit all over the place now.
I mean, London is good. I don't mind the weather that much. You know, in Greece, there's been a lot of heat, and at some point you just feel it's a bit too much this year. You know, with 40 degrees, wildfires and everything. So actually, it's good to be back.
Come back to a rainstorm instead. Yeah. Have a little bit comparative.
Cool down a bit.
Yeah, you will cool down a bit. He's got steam coming off him. Emmanuel, tell me what you're spotting in the Greek news.
So let's talk about tourism originally, because in Greece, summer tourism economy is booming right now. Yet the public sentiment is quite souring because locals find themselves increasingly excluded from the experience. So just to make you understand, tourist arrivals reached about 36 million last year, according to the numbers. They generated a lot of money for the economy, like 20 billion. And early indicators for this year is still going strong because, you know, September is still hot. They suggest another record year. And it's a surge that mirrors, global trends that are fueled by rising wealth and cheaper air travel and longer retirements in developed countries. But in Greece specifically, the problem is over tourism. A lot of islands that used to be destinations for families are slowly becoming inaccessible. The big ones like Mykonos, Santorini, Paros, you just don't go there anymore. And also, there used to be a time when you would book a ferry from Piraeus and go anywhere and just get a room. But now this generation is just feeling the burn. Like they cannot just go to the same places that they used to go. The good thing is that there are new islands that are being explored now that people didn't used to go, and as a result, tourism is booming there for the locals.
It's interesting because actually, from the point of view of an international traveller, going to Athens is a really super thing, and then you can just go an island hop, and that's the joy. It seems quite sad though that the Greeks themselves are being deprived from it. But in terms of the way that Greece now approaches its tourism strategy, this article in Ekaterini talks about the fact that Greeks are excluded from the Greek summer, so they will reject a tourism model that treats them solely as cheap labour, that actually a career in tourism becomes a bit of a challenge.
It's true. You can make a lot of money now in the summer because there's so many job openings for the summer season, and people are needed because there's a lot more tourists coming from abroad. However, what happens is that you end up working all the winter, and then as a result in the summer you're working as well. Yes, you're making money, yes, you're having opportunities. However, at the end of it, you feel like you haven't been on holidays at all.
Even though you're in Greece. What a head scratcher. Right, let's talk about wine. Assyrtiko and Vinsanto, two very beautiful grapes from Greece. And they are having difficult times. I mean, we're seeing Assyrtiko especially appearing on more and more supermarket shelves outside Greece. It's become an internationally recognised grape now. But that's actually becoming a slight challenge.
It's been a slight challenge because basically there's been a rough year. They're both produced in Santorini. And the producers there are warning that basically a combination of climate change and the tourism pressure, as we mentioned now, is threatening the island's vineyards. So basically the summer was brutal. There's been a long dry season. It was followed by some hailstorms, and that destroyed, large parts of the crops and vineyards. And to make things worse, there's now a kind of like a water shortage. And here's where it gets tricky, because wine growers are frustrated because they say the priority for the water is not going to agriculture, but instead to tourism, because, more specifically hotel swimming pools, they get the priority. Because the resorts keep popping up across the island. Great for tourism again. But there's no great water management here, and they need long-term solutions to protect the winemaking heritage.
So how do they go and find these long-term solutions? I mean, the Greeks obviously are having to think very hard on their feet, very quickly on their feet, in terms of how climate change has very direct impacts on people's lives. Athens has a new sort of like extreme heat policy, which has been in place for a couple of years. But the fact remains is that all the spotlight is very much on Greece to try and fix problems.
Look, what they do right now is they buy more land and install new vineyards for next year. However, the problem is that this year's yield is over, because now it's shifting to the winter and they're doing the red wines. But this year specifically for Assyrtiko has been a very, very bad one.
Okay, finally, let's talk about education and the fact that Greece is now becoming an international destination for international universities.
Sure, yeah. So this new academic year just around the corner, first time ever. Greece is about to get non-state universities, and that is a huge change for the country's higher education system, because it was always dominated by public institutions. And this is an idea that has been debated for years. So one side argues that, non-state universities could keep more students in Greece instead of them going abroad to study on international universities. The other side fears it could open the door to inequality, where only those who can afford private tuition will get better opportunities. However, and it's been a huge debate from both sides. However, after all that noise, the result is a little bit underwhelming because out of the 12 applications from institutions, only 4 universities got the green light to open this year and start. So that these are the University of Nicosia, University of York, Keele University, and the British Open University. It's not exactly the game-changing selection many were expecting. However, 1,500 students have enrolled this year. They're about to start. But the problem is that many of the rejected universities are already filing appeals. They claim that the requirements were impossible to meet, and they are about to get their, the funding and their investments back.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Emmanuel Papavasiliou, a Greek journalist covered in London rain. Thank you for joining us in the studio. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Finally, on today's show.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
We're going to need a bigger boat. How many times has that been used in popular culture and indeed in the Nelson household? To many, Steven Spielberg's film Jaws is the perfect movie, a relatable seaside setting of Amity Island, perfect summer, and then one of the most shocking openings in blockbuster history, the flawed human hero in James Brody, and those minimal props of plastic and wood creating maximum terror in the shape of a very, very big shark. Jaws is 50, ladies and gentlemen. Why has it never been bettered? Well, to answer that question, I'm joined in the studio by Karen Krasanovic, film critic, regular Monocle Radio voice, and this is your favourite film.
Well, this is my husband's favourite film.
And it's my husband's favourite film.
Have we married the same guy?
No.
Is his name Chris?
Yes.
Yes.
There we are. Right. So there's something about Jaws which thrills, and it seems to have like the Venn diagram of every bit of good movie. So it's that happy summer, summer blockbuster. Enough horror to terrify, but not enough to repel. But what is it to you and to the people who actually know something about film that makes Jaws so good?
Well, there's the great thing about it being the 50th anniversary is that there's so many articles about the making of Jaws, and there's this great documentary about Steven Spielberg talking about making that we know so much more about it now, which doesn't ruin. A lot of times the behind the scenes stuff, you think, it's a rubber shark. When you first saw it, you didn't think it's made out of whatever, polyethylene or whatever. What makes it great? The reason it is a lasting classic is not only its timing, when it came out in 1973, but that's right. Yes. No, 75. But it was when cinema was still quite innocent. We didn't really have the blockbuster. We didn't really have this big hit. People thought about making money with movies, but they didn't design movies to really make that. Not really. And the great thing about this is that it was also, Spielberg then was considered a young filmmaker. I mean, he was in his 20s. And he took on this job that another director who screwed up because he kept calling the shark the whale. Well, yeah, which is the producer's
That's not going to end well.
No, you're not getting it. And also, he was attempting to shoot on water. And this is something that all filmmakers know you don't do. So many have tried it. So there's so many different elements. But when you said Venn diagram, that's absolutely right. There's the sound element. And how many of us are going tonight to IMAX?
I've got the ticket. Everyone behind the glass has got the ticket.
IMAX, Jaws, IMAX. The sound is going to be amazing. People who have seen it in IMAX have said, I'm hearing noises that I didn't hear before. I'm hearing dialogue I didn't hear. I'm hearing breath of the actors that you didn't hear. So it's going to suck you right in even more. There's so many things I could say about Jaws. Stop me.
Why has it not been bettered? Because when you set because it is 5 decades since this film was made. You would have thought that someone else had done something that ticked those boxes just so thoroughly.
That's kind of like the Mona Lisa,
right?
Films, in a way. We because it made so much money, and because Spielberg really thought he was going to lose his job making this film, and also because it's pitched to. I mean, it was released exactly at the right time, and it went to this huge demographic. I mean, a lot of younger filmmakers went. And it's galvanized a whole generation of people going to the cinema. And I think it's because it's the right length. It has enough humor. I knew you were going to ask me that. I've been up since 5 getting tickets for Venice. I don't know. Okay, but it's the right length.
Look, it's the right length, ladies and gentlemen. You don't need to know the details. Just know that it's the right length. You talked about Venice. We have a scant 30 seconds that you've got your ticket. You've got your tickets for Venice.
No.
Okay. She's going to go in a minute because she needs to get tickets for Venice. But tell us you've now got 20 seconds to tell us what's happening in Venice.
Begonia, the new Lanthos Lanthos Yorgos Lanthimos, get his name right. That seems to be the pick of the festival so far. There's been many, many, many other films that a lot of people are seeing stuff tonight.
And you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to things I don't have tickets for, but never mind.
Well, there we are. We'll just let...
I'm looking forward to Dead Man's Wire by Gus Van Sant.
And we're all looking forward to going to the IMAX to be scared silly by Jaws tonight. Karen Krasanovic, film critic and regular for Monocle Radio, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers, Chris Chermack and Monica Lillis. Our researcher was Henry King and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield, with editing assistance by Flynn Simons. After the headlines, more music on the way. The briefing is live at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time on Monday. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great weekend.